get started. Today I want to go through the book a lot, and I just have little bits on the things here, and I gave you a bunch of other stuff that I find interesting, and I want to pass them along because there's such a variety of stuff that has, shaped my growing in the faith and everything. So today we're learning about the elements of Christian morality. And that's a fun thing to talk about because, as I put up here, this was before Cardinal Joseph Ratzinger got elected as Pope. He gave the homily at the Mass when all the cardinals got together after Pope John Paul II died. And this is where he came up with this term, and I know I've used that term before, but it says, today, having a clear faith based on the creed of the Church is often labeled as fundamentalism, whereas relativism, that is letting oneself be tossed here and there, carried about by every wind of doctrine, seems the only attitude that can cope with modern times. We are building a dictatorship of relativism that does not recognize anything as definitive, and whose ultimate goal consists solely of one's own ego and desires. And that's that dictatorship of relativism where, remember I told you I was going to do that $20 bill thing where I would take a $20 bill and then somebody would say something about giving it back, and I say no, that I wanted it because it was right for me. It might not be right for you, but it's right for me. And that's part of the relativism, that there's no truth. And it says the most basic principle of the Christian moral life is the awareness that every person bears the dignity of being made in the image of God. And in this day and age with social media and Facebook and tweets and whatever else is out there, I get on Facebook once in a blue moon because my password is useless because that's what it is. So, but you get that anonymity where you don't see the person, you're not close to the person, you're not face to face with the person. So it's just name on a Facebook page. So you can just put this nasty stuff out there, whatever you want, and it's awful. And you never say something like that to somebody who's face to face. And it's like, I always talk about me driving in a car, how I get mad at car. I never flip anybody off, but I'm always yelling at them in my head. And because it's got the cars between us, it's my car and that car, and I don't see the person driving that car. So it keeps it at distance. And we as Christians have to realize that we are all together. We are all made in the image of God. And then I have that God also has given us a free will to seek and love what is true, good, and beautiful. And that free will, remember from this book, I had this a couple of sessions ago from Monsignor Ronald Knox, the freedom to interfere with one another's lives, the freedom to hurt one another, and the opportunity to be hurt. So that's what free will is. God gives me free will, but he also gives the guy that goes out there and kills somebody, he gives them his free will too. And maybe he'll come after me and kill me, and that's that free will. It's hard to understand. It's easy to understand in ourselves because we probably won't do anything like going out and killing somebody. But we have that powerful surge towards the good because we are made in the image of God, but we also have those darker impulses towards evil because of the effects of original sin. And that's that Breaking Bad page that I gave you. I don't know how many of you, some of you are young and some of you are probably old enough to remember the Breaking Bad series where the guy is a science teacher and he is diagnosed with cancer, so he's trying to figure out how to pay his hospital bills and take care of his family after he dies. And so since he's a science chemistry teacher, he decides to try and make the purest methamphetamine or whatever that he can, and then he starts selling it. And his, Walter White, the chemistry teacher, whose financial problems and anxieties about his mortality lead him to turn his knowledge of the central science toward the production of an ultra-pure and world-class methamphetamine. In other words, he became a meth cook. His motives are honorable enough to provide for his family after his death. But Walter's actions in pursuit of this goal quickly show the insidious nature of moral consequentialism, relativism, how easy it is to start sliding down once you make one little move and you don't stop yourself and correct it, go to confession, whatever. The ends justify the means, and that's the thing. Early in the series, Walter confronts a dilemma, whether to let a thug to live who knows his secret or to kill him. In a particularly poignant scene, he makes a list of pros and cons. How many times have you heard people tell you to do that when you have a big decision? Make a list of the reasons you should, make a list. So that's what he's doing about killing this guy. On one side, Judeo-Christian values, and it's the right thing to do, argue against murder. On the other side, threats to his family and the possibility of getting caught support offing the guy. This is the last time we see Walter's internal struggle played out so explicitly. You can guess what happens to the drug dealer. So Walter quickly abandons his basic bourgeois decency, and by the end of the series has become so thoroughly evil that his character resembles something closer to Adolf Hitler than Bill Nye the Science Guy. It makes you shudder. It makes you think about the banality of evil and its omnipresence. Evil, real evil, is everywhere. Nevertheless, to say the word evil in public to the kind of people who watch The Bachelor, they don't. I remember we'd have a Bible study here or something, there was some kind of class, and everybody had to get home by 8 o'clock so they could watch Dancing with the Stars or whatever it was. Okay.
The Bachelor.
Huh? I've never watched a reality show because.
Oh, I turned the channel, but it's just. I watched it before. Yeah, it's just it's stupid.
But the concept of evil has become so archaic, short of something like Nazism, we're oblivious to the tiny, constant, morally questionable actions in the everyday lives of those around us and of the person in the mirror. For us, evil is somewhere else, essentially nowhere. Again, you get that blockage of, there's a separation, there's a wall. But that capacity to do great evil smolders like an ember in each of our hearts. I don't know how many times I hear something that somebody did, and I would, there was kind of extenuating circumstances, like they were in Africa, and you got the different wars and everything going on, and sometimes you see this stuff, and I think, God, I could never do something like that, but deep down inside, I know I probably could if I had to. There's a tiny Mother Teresa inside us all, but there's also a tiny Adolf with the maniacal delusions of grandeur and the potential to let them loose if conditions make it possible, as the devil and angel on the shoulder. But I just thought this was really good that this guy wrote him back from 2014, and I thought, man, that's just a powerful thing about how stuff happens. Now, freedom is not just the ability to make a choice, the responsible practice of freedom. Many people today understand human freedom merely as the ability to make a choice with no objective norm or good as the goal. I can do what I want to do. It gives me license to do whatever I want to do, even if it hurts somebody else. And they talk down here about the imputability of responsibility for an action can be diminished by ignorance or duress or fear. And I put some of these things down here. Duress, you know, back in the day, back in the hills, you know, somebody would get a guy's daughter pregnant and they got married at the end of a barrel of a shotgun. That was being forced to do something, so that, you know, you couldn't really say that they were getting married for love because they were being forced to do it. And then fear, you've got, you know, if somebody threatens you, I've seen a couple of different old movies. There was this one, it was, God, who was it? Humphrey Bogart was in it, but they had stopped at this town and taken over these people's house because the president was coming on a train, and the house was situated up on a hill, and they were going to try and assassinate the president. They held the family captive and everything, and they were making the people do stuff, but they were doing it, but then they were trying to surreptitiously, and they managed to rig the TV somehow, so when the guy touched the cord, he got electrocuted, so it was, yeah, probably fake. And it's psychological. There are a lot of psychological diseases that people have. I watch a lot of, I like the crime solving shows, like on ID Network. There's some shows called See No Evil, and it shows how they solve crimes by using video cameras. But some of the crimes these people commit, it's just, you watch and you think, oh my God, this one guy killed his first wife. This is one I just saw. Killed his first wife, made it look like an accident, married this second woman. So he had 2 kids from the first marriage. Brought them, they had another child together, and then he started getting whacked out, and he ended up killing the kids when she was gone, because she said that was it, she was leaving him because of the stuff that he was doing. And when she had gone to work, he killed all 3 kids, and, you know, for the insurance money. It's, you know, try to make it lit a fire to make it look like, well, he barely got out, he couldn't go back in and save the kids. But, you know, in the end, he got found out. But he just, so is he mentally ill, since it was just something that he kept doing, and he was driven to do that? Or was he totally evil? So you've got that, you know, that psychological edge that I leave to the psychologist, because I'm not one.
You can pray your phone's locked up.
You know what, a lot of times I think these people are born without a conscience.
And I've seen some shows where they start with the mothers talking about how the child, even when he was young, this one kid was just, he tried to kill his sister when she was a baby. He tried to, you know, kill cats and do this other stuff. So that was like from the very beginning. So
Right.
that could be. But it's something to ponder, and it's something to watch in our own selves about why we do certain things. And then the moral acts, every moral act consists of 3 elements. The objective act, what, it's the what we do. The subjective act, if you know your English, the old English, I teach a subject and a predicate and all that stuff. The subjective goal is why we do something in the first place. And then the concrete situation or circumstances in which we perform the act, the where, the when, the how. For an individual act to be morally good, the object of what we are doing must be objectively good. And I have that down here. I just shortened it out. And they're talking about intrinsically evil acts, direct killing of the innocent, torture, rape, you know, murder. Acts are always wrong. Such acts are referred to as intrinsically evil acts, meaning they're just wrong in themselves. That's part of natural law. Anywhere you go, you have, you know, people know that you shouldn't kill somebody else, only, you know, self-defense if you're doing something, or if they're trying to attack you and everything, apart from the reason they are done. And it says on, let me see, oh, it's on page 12, it says we can never do something wrong or evil in order to bring about a good. And the most common example of that is back in the day, I don't think anybody's done it for a while, but there for a while, like back in the 90s and stuff, people were going and killing abortion doctors in order to try to stop abortions from happening. Well, you can't do that. You might think you've got a good goal there, but you can't go out and kill somebody because that's an evil act itself, and you're in the same, you just put yourself in the same boat as the abortionist. So you can't do something bad in order to try to make something good. And this teaching is often at odds with a perspective that views morality as completely personal or merely subjective reality. I've got notes all over the place. Such a denial of an objective and unchanging moral order established by God results in a vision of a morality and moral norms as being a matter of personal opinion. And I found this because I'm taking a class, well, I'm not taking a class, it's a kind of a Bible study, but it's not Bible. It's called Who Am I to Judge? And I meet every 2 weeks with people at St. Jude's. And he was using, it was Dr. Edward Sri, and he was using this thing that this guy had written, Christian Smith, called Lost in Translation. And he's talking about young people. Morality is ultimately a matter of personal opinion. It is wrong to render moral judgments of the moral beliefs and behaviors of other people unless they directly harm you. What about if they harm somebody else? That's wrong too. Everyone should tolerate everyone else, take care of their own business, and hopefully get along. Jesus called us to do so much more than just tolerate one another. He said, love one another. That means be involved with everyone's life. And this thing here, it's hopefully get along, and it reminds me, what came to my mind when I'm reading that, it's like, I went to school here, so this was the 7th grade, and you're sitting in your chairs, and you're kind of sliding down because the teacher's talking about something she's asking people, so you're just kind of sliding down, you got your book up like that, and you're like hoping that she doesn't see you and hoping that she doesn't call on you. And it's just hiding out because you don't want to get involved. And it continues, at the same time, these emerging adults have not been taught well how to differentiate between strong moral and religious claims that should be tolerated and those that should be refuted, rejected, and opposed. Something like that would be, I don't know if they've disbanded or what, but you remember the Westboro Baptist Church? It was like a family clan, and they were out like in Arkansas or something, and they would go to military funerals, and they're holding signs, God hates fags, this, that, and the other thing, and it's like, this is a church? And finally you had like the biker guys come and put a wall between them because these people are grieving at the loss of their son or daughter from, the Miller War or something. And then you got these clowns over here calling them names and everything, and it's because they would say that God's going to destroy America because of homosexuality or whatever. And it was basically just a family, like a family group that had this church. And I haven't heard any more about them, so I wonder if they disbanded with the death of the patriarch or whatever. But that would be an advantage, or that would be in what's the word I want? Example. That would be an example of religious claim that should be refuted, objected, and opposed, because that was just so totally wrong. As a result, many emerging adults simply end up trying to completely avoid making any strong moral claims themselves, as well as avoiding criticizing the moral views of others. But what few of them seem to realize is that such a position makes it impossible to rationally evaluate any moral wrong, including the horrific destruction and violence that helped drive them to this tolerant position in the first place. And then I have some examples here. I know the book has talks about 9/11, and that was in 2001. But back in the Holocaust in the late 30s and 40s, a lot of people that lived there claimed they didn't know about it. But I don't, if you lived really, really close, I don't know how you could not be suspicious about German trucks hauling people into something, and then the odor had to have been incredible.
We couldn't do anything about it.
Well, yeah. Yeah. The Rwandan genocide was in 1994, and that was the killings back and forth between the Hutus and the Tutsis. And it's brought forth this one really, really excellent pro-life lady now. She's pro-life Africa, Immaculée Ilibagiza. But she was one of 5 people that were hiding in a bathroom for a month or more. And they managed to escape detection from being, and they were just in this little room. And then most recently, and back in 2015, I don't know how many of you remember, because they showed it. They showed them marching up those 21, actually it was 20 Coptic Christians, and one of the men was from, God, where was he from? So he wasn't even Christian, but he saw their faith and went along with them, and then they ended up killing him. They had the guys all dressed in black standing in the back of them, and they were kneeling on the edge of and I just found this out, and I'm looking up this stuff, because they're on the beach in Libya, and they're right across from this big fancy hotel, and it's like, oh my, so they're trying to make a statement, and at the thing, it's like whack off their heads. So they're trying to get them to be saints, and they're working on it because they died for their faith. But that's some of the big stuff that most people can say, yeah, that's evil, that's terrible. But there's not so big stuff going on every day in the world, here, in our little circles, farther out. And we as Christians, we have to learn to be able to recognize that and not be afraid to say something if it won't be, find an opportunistic time or try to.
Well, it's not just saying something, we should do something that anything at all is possible. If you see something completely unjust, you can't ignore it. It can't be ignored. I mean, you take the story of Anne Frank, they hid her out. People who were not Jewish hid her out. They did the right thing. That's the right thing. To do all that you can, not just to speak out. Words are nothing without actions behind them.
Have you heard of Corrie ten Boom?
No, I have not.
I'm trying to think of the name of it. They did a book, and I saw a movie about it. It was very graphic. They were in, her and her sister were in a prison camp because they were Dutch. They weren't Jewish, but they got caught hiding Jewish people, and they got arrested and thrown in and she's the only survivor from her
I
family.
got in a couple fights at school even because of injustices to people of color. Because when I went to school, there were all the riots going on. And it wasn't easy to open my mouth and do something, but somebody had to. And if a kid can do it, I think that everyone should do all that they can when they see any kind of injustice, is all I'm saying. You know, words aren't ever enough.
Yeah, and that will go to the gas station angel thing that I gave you. That's somebody seeing a need. You just notice a need. I won't read that, you can read that for yourself, but it's really good. And, I think about, for that, I think about like Mary at the wedding feast of Cana. She didn't say a whole lot, she just noticed that people
Need a
were
word.
getting low on wine. And she doesn't make a big deal about it, she just goes and, you know, of course she has a son who can actually do something. Of course, you know, I could sense that if I was there, if I wasn't the mother of Jesus, I could tell my son to go down to the liquor store and buy more wine, but he created it, you know, so it's just being that presence of noticing a need wherever you happen to be. If you notice a need, if you can fix it, do it. If you can direct someone who can fix it. You know, I pass by people who are stopping on the side of on the road with car trouble. I can't stop because I don't know anything about cars, but I can go down to the garage and ask them if they called somebody, because, you know, now back when highways, you had to go to a payphone or whatever, because you didn't have cell phones. Now everybody's got cell phones, so usually they can call somebody right away. But, you know, so that would be useless for me to stop, because I'd probably just mess something up worse, since I don't know anything about cars. But, yeah, so that would be part of that. And then the reality of sin, goes on, the whole thing goes on, because so many people don't think that we recognize past sins as not sin anymore. And one of these that is the most common nowadays is living together before being married. That is a sin. But everybody thinks it's a good way to test period and stuff. My grandson lived together with his girlfriend for 3 years before they finally got married, just last November. But it's, and there's other things that you used to think about. And that's part of the slide. That's part of the slide, that we don't think certain things are sins anymore, so we just keep going on down a little bit farther. And it's like I don't know how many of you have heard the story of how to boil a frog. You put a frog in a pan of cold water, and then you turn the heat on real low, and he gets used to it, so he doesn't try, you know, it's not a big pan, he can hop out if he wants to, and you just keep turning up the heat, and he gets used to it, and you turn up the heat, he gets used to it, you keep turning up the heat, he keeps getting used to it, and finally got that heat up so high, he cooks, and he's dead. It's so incremental, so slowly, it creeps up on us, and that's Satan's biggest modus operandi is to not to make you forget God, because as Christians we won't, you know, we pray when we get in trouble and stuff, but it's to think that God won't care about this little thing. God doesn't think that's a sin. God doesn't care about that. But there's one institution that still calls sin, and that is the church. And she has the unenviable task of teaching about sin in a relativistic world that doesn't believe in sin anymore, or for God, for most part of that matter. The church, which is full of sinners, because then that's when you try telling somebody something, you have to be careful, because then they'll throw, who am I to judge? Who are you to judge me? And that's not what that verse is talking about. That verse is talking about, I see people post on Facebook about some killer killed somebody, really did a bad thing and he needs to rot in hell. That's the judgment. That's the judgment. And God, who said it? Somebody said it. It says, I hope that man will be as understanding and let me live to the end of my life before judging me, just like God does. Because I can be bad, and then I can turn my life around, because so many people have. So many people. You got people in the Bible. What I talk about David, man after God's own heart. Committed murder, committed adultery, all kinds of stuff. And there's so many people in the Bible, and there's so many people in our world that have turned their lives around. So you can't judge somebody how they are now, because they're not done living their lives. And I have this book here. This is a really good book. I had to do a paper on this, just a short paper, for when I was doing the education for ministry classes back in 2005. Yeah, because this book was written in 1990, and my paper was written in 2005, so I said, okay, it's 15 years since he wrote the book, and I wrote my paper, now it's 15 years since I wrote my paper. I said, very readable. Peter Kraft is a very smart, is he a PhD? It says, I don't, but he's a professor of philosophy at Boston College. Of course, that's back in the 1990s. But he's one of these people that is very readable, like Scott Hahn. Scott Hahn is really, really smart, and he's a professor at Steubenville, St. Franciscan University in Steubenville. And he's really, really smart, but they write really, really readable. And that was one of the things is sin outdated? Just the opposite. Sin is the only Christian dogma that can be proved just by reading the newspapers, just by watching the news on TV, just by listening, just by going out and looking, and you can see the effects of original sin, that there is sin. And G.K. Chesterton and Malcolm Muggeridge, another Catholic writer, have said things like that too, that there's, just look around you and you can see the effects of original sin. But people are not able to discern right or wrong. Everything is relative. There's no absolute truth. But to say there is absolutely no truth is in itself an absolute truth. So relativism, and I found this very interesting, relativism enables us to do what we want without feeling bad, without feeling guilty. So, because it's what I want to do. And that leads us to pride. The sin of pride is the first, all the other sins come from pride. I, Adam and Eve now, I will eat from the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, and I will become God. And talking about sliding down, as I did a little bit ago, the venial sins, deliberate and unrepented venial sin, disposes us little by little to commit mortal sins. Frequent confession is necessary, even if you don't think you have any sins. And I've said the priest has heard everything, and a good thing to do is to go by the commandments, which we are starting. We're going to start going through the 10 commandments next week. But what's the first commandment? You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, and you shall have no other gods before me. You shall have no idols or worship anything else besides me. But nobody ever confesses that. And that's the number one sin. And we all make idols of other things other than God. We all put ourselves first if we don't feel like doing something. I should go visit my elderly neighbor across the road. I should go see how she's doing. Little stuff like that. I'm tired. I worked all day. I just want to go home and sit in front of the TV. You know, it's just that you keep getting away with a little bit more and a little bit more and a little bit more until you finally get to the point where nothing affects you and you've got the, you know, I'm a good person. I've never killed anybody. I go to church on Sunday. There's more to it than that. And then they went through, they have the cardinal virtues, which directs us towards people. Ours starts with ourselves. Prudence is, okay, I'll give you an example. When you're young, fighting with your brother or sister, and you keep pushing them and pushing them and pushing them, and you know that he's going to get mad and explode and jump all over you. Prudence would be to know when to stop so that he doesn't tell your mom on you and you get in trouble. Otherwise, you're going to keep going, and your brother or sister's going to start a fight, and mom's going to come in. And justice is wanting to see justice for everyone, not just me. I just watched, I keep talking about what I watch on TV. You tell I watch too much TV. But no, it was on last Sunday. The two girls got killed in Delphi, Indiana, like 4 years ago, Abby and Libby. I was watching that because they're trying to keep it alive, to keep the story going, so people keep looking for the guy. But, you know, my daughter was not too much older when it happened, and I feel so terrible for them because they don't have, the one girl managed to take a picture of the guy coming towards them. She managed to record his voice, and they still don't know who it is.
But that was down in southern Indiana. that
Delphi,
was-
yeah.
Okay.
I'm just so, it just troubles me so much because I think it could have been my daughter. Because back around the time my daughter was 11, this was like down in Arcus or something. Girl stayed home from school because she was sick. Somebody came in and killed her. She was home by herself. And I'm like, God. And I don't know if they ever found out who did that. But it's, you know, it's gotta be hard to have a family member killed, much less to have no idea who did it. The police can't find out
We
who
had
did
such
it.
a clear picture of him, I cannot understand why they can't find him.
I don't know. And they thought that he might have been a trucker going through, but he had to have known, because when you cross that bridge, you have to turn around and go back, because otherwise it's just woods.
He had to know that.
And that's where he took him, that's when he said down the hill. And they had to go down the hill to the water, and then they were found on the other side. But, I just, see, I have that. And a lot of people will confuse justice with revenge, and you can't take matters into your own hand. It's just wanting, and fortitude, okay. Fortitude is what the family members of those two girls have. They're just staying, you know, trying to keep the story alive, keeping their hopes up, loving their lives. They haven't abandoned God or anything like that, because it's so hard when something like that happens. People always want to blame God, and it's not God. It's the devil. It's sin. It's Adam and Eve who gave us original sin, who let sin into the world. Well, God could have stopped it. Well, God gave us free will, the ability to interfere with one another's lives, the freedom to hurt one another, and the opportunity to be hurt. Everybody has free will, or it wouldn't be free will. Temperance is along the lines of prudence, but it's more physical, like food, drink. You gotta know when to stop, so you don't go over the line. And then the theological virtues aim us towards God, faith, hope, and charity. You have faith in God, faith that if I do what God wants, if I do what I'm supposed to, that I will go to heaven in the end. I hope in God. I hope that He fixes things. I hope that God lets that guy be captured, that they find that guy who killed those two girls. And then charity, which a lot of people just want to call love, but it's more than love, because then I have a little on the next page, love equals love. So charity is again having that
Active.
watchfulness for others' needs, to be there, and it's love for one another, because you're my brothers and sisters. I should do what I can for you, just as I would hope that you would do for me in my need. And St. Paul says in 1 Corinthians, where he says, in the end, these three remain: faith, hope, and love. They translate it love. And in the end, there will just be love, because when you're in heaven, you don't have to have faith anymore, because you know. You don't have to have hope anymore, because you're there. All you're going to have is love for everybody who's there, and especially for God. So, rules and love. Rules. And see, that's how most people view moral law. They're just rules, random rules from religion, more or less. They're controlling. They're out of touch with modern man. Why doesn't the church modernize? And I always hear that people take something out of context that Pope Francis says. The popes, I love the popes. Pope John Paul II was an excellent speaker. He was a very good people person. He was out, you could understand, it was hard to understand his Polish accent, but you could listen to him, and you just love how he talked. But when you try to read him, he's really, really deep and hard to read. And then Pope Benedict got elected, and he's a professor, so everybody's thinking that his readings are going to be tough. He wasn't that. He was a good speaker, but he was very professorial. And when you read his stuff, he writes really, really readable. He's very, very good. Now, Pope Francis, he doesn't talk so well, because people like to get him talking ad lib, and then they'll take something out of context. Oh, he's changing this. Oh, he's changing the church. Oh, he's going to do this for the church. He's making this change. He's doing this. He can't change the church. He is the protector of everything that we have learned from Jesus Christ. He can only protect it and preserve it. But his reading, we had Fratelli Tutti. We went through his latest encyclical, and I was glad I read it. It was very good, and he quotes a lot from the previous popes and everything. So he's like Pope Benedict in that he probably shouldn't speak off the cuff, but he's readable. So, but going back to the rules, and so that's the biggest problem, is that it's, I have it down farther. The Ten Commandments, I have it on the other page. That's what people think. The Ten Commandments are you shall not, you shall not, you shall not, you shall not. And it's what can I do? But not understanding the why behind God's law can sometimes lead us to resent or even disregard His moral law. And when that happens, we miss out on a great gift from our loving Father. Moral law flows out of God's love for us. The entire purpose of His law is to ensure happiness by showing us how to live the life He created us for. And I have that said, remember St. Augustine, and that was from his very, very first thing. And I think that starts out in the first lesson that we had. Yet man, this is part of your creation, wishes to praise you. You arouse him to take joy in praising you, For you have made us for yourself, and our heart is restless until it rests in you. And we go looking willy-nilly all over the place for something that we think is gonna make us happy. And I did, you know, I'm not perfect, I don't see my hair over my head. But it's so easy to ignore because we can't see them. We can't see them. We can see the crucifix every so often, if we have one, but we've seen them so often, we just kind of, you know, oh, it's a crucifix. Other people look at that, you know, and they're horrified by, you know, oh my gosh. I think I told you about that movie Bakita that's on EWTN. It's just on because her feast day was just up, where she comes into the church and she's looking around and she looks up at the thing, and she had seen when she was a slave, she saw a slave getting punished by being crucified, and she's like, and she sees the cross and she's like,
So she's basically terrified.
yeah, she goes, what did that slave do that he's crucified, and why do you have him hanging up there in the church? So the priest is explaining to her, so it's very interesting. But, and that, so many people think that, you know, the consequences, the natural law, stuff we do will have a natural effect. The consequences are not vindictive punishments dealt by a God who is angry at being disobeyed. The consequences are natural results of trying to live in a way contrary to how God created us. You know, you drink too much, you get liver problems. You drive drunk, you get in an accident, you kill somebody, you go to jail. There's just consequences to doing things, and it's not God punishing us. In our permissive culture, love is no longer charity, it is love. And it's why thousands of dollars are spent on weddings that don't last, and people are still paying the bills long after the divorce has happened. How many times has that happened? You got people are always talking, when they're getting married, they're always talking about, you know, the wedding and the dress and the bridesmaids' dresses and this, that, and they spend so much more time on the visual effects and not too much time getting to know one another, unless you've been going together for a long time. Like, you know, my grandson, I said he lived with his girlfriend for a long time, and she was basically a bounce off because he had broken up with another girlfriend he'd gone with for like 4 years, and she broke up with him, and he met this girl, and they hit it off, and everybody's saying, oh, it's just a, what do you call that? Rebound, thank you. Rebound thing, it's not gonna last. Oh, my daughter did not like this girl. I liked her, and she was just fine. She made Gage happy. But they ended up being together, and they just fit like gloves, and I'm very happy that they finally got married. Now all we gotta do is have them consolidated in the church, because they got married in Vegas. She wanted a Vegas wedding, so Gage is just like, I don't care. He goes, this stuff is for the girl anyway. So. But I was pleased because it was a woman preacher, and you could hear her, because she asked, I guess they have different things, and she was talking about God and the seriousness at the wedding, and I was very surprised for a Vegas wedding. It was actually pretty religious, so I was happy about that. But in the end, I put that when I finally realized how much I was loved by God, which I never did before, and this happened not too often long ago, then I start to respond to others the same way, because they are made in God's image. So I am more aware. I try to help out people more. I try to not gossip. I try to, you know, just treat others. What's that golden rule? Treat others the way you want to be treated. And that's Luke chapter 6, verse 31. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. And that's kind of a little bit of a turnaround, because the originally thing is in Tobit, book of Tobit, chapter 4. And what you hate, do not do to another. So those are, that, you know, how simple is that? That's two simple ways to, yeah, you can read this whole book, you can read a bunch of books like I do and everything, but you get the scriptures, and it's like one-liners, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. What you hate, don't do to somebody else. It just makes so much sense. And then they talk about the civil laws in chapter 24. They can try to, civil laws can partially help to eliminate fears, prejudices, and attitudes of pride and selfishness that cause injuries, but an inner spiritual conversion is also needed. You can't legislate thought. People are going to have thoughts, and, you know, hopefully as they learn, they will grow like I did. You know, one of my things was that the church disagreed on is that capital punishment. I thought capital punishment was good, and it's still. Pope Francis changed a little thing about it, but I think it's still, because it can be, it's rare. You don't really need to use it that much. And I'm always like, you know, Friday SOB. But now I have slowly learned more and listened to other things and everything, so I'm kind of not, you know, not for it. It's just, you know, lock them up. But the prison system definitely needs an overhaul too, because some of the places are still, you're in prison, they're still run by gangs, and the guards can't do anything. It's really, I sure would not want to go to prison in this day and age. In some examples that they give in the book, they had slavery and racism and human trafficking. And human trafficking has slowly started coming to the forefront with the whole Jeffrey Epstein thing that's been going on. And Trump had been working a lot with the different groups, and you never used to hear about it, but now every month or a couple months you hear the cops or the FBI or whatever found a house. They got, 20 kids out of there. They found 30 women. So they're slowly trying to get this, because this is a bigger deal than most people want to admit, and it's frightening. It's really frightening. And then there's other examples of current issues: redefinition of marriage, adultery, abortion, euthanasia, contraception, embryonic stem cell research, which adult stem cell research, surprisingly, you never hear about it, but that has had more progress than embryonic stem cell research has. Immigration, poverty, environment, stewardess, war, and political corruption. So those are different things that are going on, and everybody has different interests. And if you want to get involved in one of those groups, there's plenty of them. Because evil, who said that? Evil is able to happen when a good man sits back and does nothing. And that's it. We've become, like it says, we just want to tolerate everyone else, take care of our own business, and hopefully get along. We want to sit back and not say a word because we don't want somebody jumping on us. Because you know why? We know why I used to be quiet? Because I didn't know how to speak for different things. And as I grew in my knowledge, and I do it because I have to. I was watching this, speaking of the euthanasia, I just watched a show on, this is on EWTN though, this is good, but it was a program on euthanasia. I think I might have talked about it before. But it's frightening how you get that slippery slope. You start, okay, we'll let you commit suicide if you're dying. Well, now you can commit suicide if you're not dying, if you're just in pain. Well, now you don't have to commit suicide. The doctors can help you commit suicide. Now you can commit suicide, or the doctor can help you if you just feel bad, if you're depressed. Yeah, it was mostly based in the Netherlands, which is where euthanasia is really big, and they're killing people who aren't. They're not even close to death. They're kids. Kids can have the right, because they feel bad, can kill themselves. Do you see, that's the slippery slope. It just keeps going down. Oh, euthanasia is a good thing. We can, we put dogs down when they're sick, and horses, and we might as well put somebody else down when they're dying. We might as well put a human down. I'm not a dog or a horse. I'm a human. They've got excellent pain control now, and it's frightening to me, because I'm getting up there, so it's like, I make sure I tell my family not to, don't you be having me put to sleep, put me out of my misery. And you know what a lot of that is? I may have said this before too. A lot of that is, I'm putting you out of my misery. I don't want to see you suffer. That hurts me. It bothers me. I don't want to have to come visit you. I don't want to have to take the time to do this. It's just too much trouble. You're dying anyway. Take a pill. It's not for the convenience of the person who's being sick. In this day and age, it's for the convenience of the people who have to take care of them and don't want to. But in the precepts of the church, they have on page 334, and this is like the bare minimum. You shall attend Mass on Sundays and holy days, confess your sins at least once a year. And I said it's better to go. When we were in school here, grade school, we went once a month. We went on first Thursday, so we could go to Mass on first Friday. Receive the Eucharist, at least during the Easter season, once a year. That's all that's required. Observe the prescribed days of fasting and abstinence. And we just had one. Ash Wednesday was a day of fasting and abstinence, and then Good Friday will be a day of fasting and abstinence. The days in Lent are Fridays in Lent are just days of abstaining from meat. So eat fish, eat grilled cheese, something like that. And it's just, because, and it never fails. I'm coming home from work and I want a big fat hamburger to stop and take home from work on a Friday. So what does that do? That makes me stop and think of God, because I can't have it. I want it really bad, but I can't have it. And I take that sacrifice and I lay it at the foot of the cross, like we're supposed to.
I feel you on that.
So in Lent, I gave you these little booklets, because we're just starting out. Abstaining is mainly abstaining from meat. Fasting is fasting from one main meal, and then you can have two smaller like snacks, because they shouldn't equal the main meal. So, and it's to help you remember that other people are hungry, and empties you up. Hopefully, they say, empty yourself out so there's room for the Holy Spirit to come in. But it is hard. It's really hard. I have to stop and think. And I want to do what I want to do. And that's this day and age. But that's the precepts of the church. And then on the back, the last page, oh, I didn't even look and see what time it is. Oh, good, I'm still under 12 o'clock. The Ten Commandments, we're gonna start those now. Paul will do the first ones. But it helps to find out where the Ten Commandments came from. Because I said, you shall not, you shall not, you shall not. Rules. In the book of Genesis, you had God created Adam and Eve, and they had Cain and Abel. You got Noah's Ark, the Tower of Babel. Abram changed his name, God changed his name to Abraham, sent him out. Sodom and Gomorrah, the descendants down to Joseph from the amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat. That's getting old too. I don't know how many of you remember that. But, and he was sold into slavery by his brothers because they were jealous because they thought daddy liked him best of all. And Joseph, and he ends up in Egypt, and then there's a famine, and all the Israelites go to Egypt because Joseph had been able to interpret the dream, and they had plenty of food stored up because they had 7 good years, and they knew that there was a famine coming. So Exodus, after 430 years, the Israelites finally escaped Pharaoh and slavery. They hated it. They wanted to get out of there. And on their way to the Promised Land, which should have taken them a couple weeks to get, if that, they were constantly complaining. I only got 3 examples here. I'm reading these pages, and I'm finding almost every page, every tiny, I don't know how Moses dealt with it. Manna and the quail. Would that we had died at the Lord's hand in the land of Egypt as we sat by our flesh pots and ate our fill of bread. But you had to lead us into this desert to make the whole community die of famine. So that's when God started sending down the manna. And then they were complaining about the manna. And so he sent them the quail so they'd have some meat. And then the water from the rock. And why did you ever make us leave Egypt? They hated Egypt. They were slaves there. It was terrible. Why did you make us ever leave Egypt? Was it just to have us die here of thirst with our children and our livestock? And that's when he taps the rock, and there's a rock following them and gives them water. But all they do, and then they're still complaining. Why have you brought us up from the land of Egypt to die in the wilderness? For there is no food and no water, and we detest this miserable food. They're talking about the manna. They're talking about the bread from heaven. God sent bread from heaven, and they're tired of that miserable food. And it's just like that on every, and that's why he just made them circling around. That's why they were wandering for 40 years in the desert. Because they wouldn't shut up complaining. Oh my gosh. And they saw him. They saw God part the Red Sea. They saw the different plagues. They saw the last one where they killed the firstborn, even the livestock. And they saw that happen, and the angel passed over because they had the Passover, and they put the blood on the lintels, the door lintels. And then they're going, and God parts the Red Sea and lets them walk through. And then when the Egyptians go in the water, he makes the sea come back down on them. They're seeing all this stuff. They saw all this stuff. How easily they forget it. And then they complain. And the 10 Commandments were given to them. I can't remember where I saw this. To take the Egypt out of Israel. Because remember when Moses went up on the mountain and he was gone a long time, they think, oh, he's dead. He's not coming back. We got to make a golden calf. Well, Egypt has the worships of calves and stuff like that. And they do in India too. But they're still going back, they're looking back towards Egypt because they've been there for so long. And the 10 Commandments are taken to give Egypt out of them. I'm your God. Do this, do this, do this. And you must admit, when you read the 10 Commandments, there's another. The 10 Commandments are given to us. It's where we find our minimal duties towards God and neighbor set forth in clear terms. That's another thing. You got those one-liners. How easy. How easy. We don't have the 613 rules that the Pharisees had. But it's all right there for us. He makes it easy. It's just up to me to say no to myself, you know, it's all about me. Any questions? Any comments? Yes, ma'am?
What's your question? No,
What?
Do you have chocolate thing? Remember that chocolate thing?
Mm-hmm.
What do you mean about?
Oh, you want me to bring you a bottle of Grace next week?
Yeah. I was joking.
Oh, my goodness sakes. Well, let's,
I got a question.
oh, good.
If someone is sick in the hospital and they're on the verge of passing or not passing, and the doctor asks you to make a decision, you didn't give that body, do you have that right to take it away? To make that decision, to tell the doctor to let them go?
No, yeah, you can, if there's absolutely no hope, and there's also, because a lot of things they try to do is stop feeding and water. And if that's causing distress to someone who is near death, yes, you can stop. They can choose, or you can choose to stop. But there's a whole, I'll have to bring the book in, because it's they have all kinds of guidelines and stuff. But don't have the doctor kill them.
Yeah, but basically the answer is yes. I mean, people are gonna die, everybody dies eventually. And so, if somebody's in the hospital and they're, on the verge of death, the doctors will generally give them morphine or something like that, and, what the church says is that you cannot kill somebody, which is, and I don't think many doctors would do that.
But do God look at it as mercy, or how does he view it?
That's letting a natural death occur. That's a natural death, because they're in the hospital, but they're dying. So you can disconnect, especially if they're on a respirator and stuff like that.
But they were gonna turn it off on my daughter,
Yeah,
and she came back, Tony.
Mhm.
She was in a coma,
and if they
She was
would have
on
done it,
life
she would have
support.
died.
Yeah,
on life support and in a coma.
yeah. Okay,
And we
but she was
refused to-
young,
We
yeah.
refused to let
No,
her
she's
come
not
back.
young, she's older than I am.
Well, yeah, but I'm thinking of like 80s and 90s people that are.
But you have to clarify that,
Yeah.
because there should be no hope of life existing again
Yeah,
within the body. You should make sure that there's no hope of life. You don't just pull the plug because the doctor suggests it. You gotta wait a week or two, look for signs, make sure there's no sign of life.
That's my daughter that I brought in here, that was.
I seen signs of life when nobody else did, and everybody thought I was crazy. And I'm arguing, I'm saying, there's still life in there. I know she's trying to reach me. Just by the way her eyes were moving, I knew it, and it was true. And that's what people gotta pay attention, you gotta make sure there's no sign of life. Because if they would've pulled the plug then, and the doctors were pressuring her family to do so,
We fought with them for about a week before she finally came back out of it.
she would have died. We had a fight about it. We
Oh, yeah.
were all arguing, people were thinking we were crazy. Mom saw it, and I saw it, and everybody else did not see it.
Oh, well, my
The
mom.
doctors didn't see it.
So I think from the point of view of the doctors, they looked at it and, I mean, it's a very inexact science, which is the problem with this. Do you know if somebody, if you denied somebody, if you just gave them morphine and just sort of didn't do some extraordinary thing, would they continue to live? Would they come back? I mean, your sister did. If the doctor had talked you into it, you would let it go. In retrospect, it would have been a bad thing to do. but it wouldn't have been a sin. If you're doing the best you can.
Well, yeah, but you have to be educated, you have to know the decision you're making is the correct one. It's not something you can just do quickly.
Yeah, you can't let the physician tell you everything, because it is your choice. On the other hand, the doctor, in many ways, knows more than you do.
I have to go look it up. All the information's available to find.
See, that's another thing with euthanasia, is the insurance companies say it's cheaper to give them a pill to kill them than to do the medical treatment. It's another,
A lot of insurance companies push for this too, to pull the plug in that because they don't want to pay for it all. And the doctors are at the mercy of the insurance companies.
Because her kidneys failed during this time too,
And she would have died.
and yet she came back. And her kidneys are fine now.
In fact, she's doing better than ever.
Yeah.
yeah, but it's, we know our family members, and so we can kind of tell, especially when they're elderly, if they're ready to go. And,
I don't know if you can.
I think you just really have to pray about it
yeah,
and educate yourself and know what's going on.
I
Don't
will
let somebody push you into something.
try to get on some websites and get some more information, guidelines.
I mean, I don't think that if it would be a natural death, that it would be a sin. But I also think it's our responsibility as Christians and family members to make sure that we're, to the best of our ability, making that right decision. It's not something to be trifled with or rushed.
Oh, I don't want to go too much longer, but that's an important point, is that when you, in all of this, you have to have a backbone. And that's sort of the point of all of this, have a backbone. Well, how are you going to have a backbone? You can be an extremist and take an extreme point of view and then, okay, I'm strong. Well, yeah, but you're probably wrong. And the best way to do it is to rely on something like the church and say, okay, these people have thought about this a great deal. So I need to think with the church, or I need to think these things through and build on that. That way you're not alone. If you're, I don't know, you talked about the martyrs on the beach, and if you're one, I think the reason they were able to go through it is because they were with the church. If they were just a couple of secularists who thought of on their own, they probably would have caved in. Sorry, we went a little long. Anybody wants to talk about this after class?
Yeah, well, and there's the 10 themes of Catholic social teaching, and this poem that I got from, I heard it on Archbishop Fulton Sheen's show, and I just love it, because it's about the
Closing prayer.
not believing the devil. You what? Oh, okay. Let's do... Let's just do the St. Michael prayer, which is on page 538. Since you're going out into the world to make war on the devil.
I'm gonna destroy the devil.
Ready? Oh, no. Okay. In the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Saint Michael, the Archangel, defend us in battle. Be our protection against the wickedness and snares of the devil. May God rebuke him, we humbly pray. And do thou, Prince of the heavenly host, by the power of God, thrust into hell Satan and all the evil spirits who prowl about the world, seeking the ruin of souls. Amen. The Father, and the Son, and the Spirit. Amen.